Welcome to Radio 5G. This is Michael Henry Dunn, and we are joined today by three remarkable women from the Taos, New Mexico region, Reese Jula, Jeannie Lotz, and Falcon Britt, who are spearheading the 5G movement there in Taos, with a crucial meeting coming up with the county commissioners on June 11th. And they are waking up that entire region to the facts about 5G and why the rollout needs absolutely to be halted. So welcome to Radio 5G. This is Michael Henry Dunn with my co-host Nancy Hopkins. And how are you doing today, Nancy?
Well, I'm trying to get together. a little bit discombobulated. I'm fine, and I'm so excited about having these three wonderful women here because it's these kind of people, these people that we need to be making this amazing change. So, go for it.
Right. Okay. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a summary of what's going on in Taos, just a thumbnail, because I love for the three of you to help us see the big picture of what's going down in Taos. But just to give an introduction. To start with, as I just shared, there is a meeting coming up at 9 a.m. on June 11th with the Taos County Commissioners Council, and the Stop 5G movement in Taos, which can be checked out at their website at is5gsafe.org, has already been holding a series of public wake-up events, tables at supermarkets, on the National 5G Awareness Day last week on the 15th. They had representatives and tables getting people to sign petitions at all the major retail outlets of the big telecom companies, Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, etc. And there's hundreds of people who are already signing petitions, many volunteers beginning to join the movement there. In advance of this really crucial meeting on June 11th, and there'll be a number of 5G experts on hand to testify to hopefully persuade the county commissioners not to vote in favor of an action that would clear the way for 5G to be rolled out immediately within the coming months in Taos. And so we are joined today by novelist Reese Jula, who is the author of the Souls Blossom in Winter book series, and who is also the owner of a beautiful spa in Taos as well, and by Jeannie Lotz and Falcon Britt. So I'd just like to ask you one by one to just say hello and give a little introduction of yourselves, and specifically, of course, as to how you came to wake up to the reality of what's happening with 5G and to begin to join forces for the Stop 5G movement in Taos. So welcome, Reese. Can you share a little bit with us, please?
Sure. My name is Reese Murphy, and Jula is my pen name. So Reese Jula is the pen name for my books and novels. I was actually this year in Hawaii in January and started to get some funny messages from my neighbors about what we believe now is what we call TWACs, which is a dirty electricity. And when we came back at the end of January, I started to do some research just to find out, like, why were my neighbors getting ill and not feeling well? And that led me to start to research about 5G. And then suddenly I realized, oh my gosh, I might need to move from Taos if this 5G is coming here. And then I realized that 5G was going everywhere in the world. And that was the beginning. And that was probably mid-February. When that first came up for me. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeannie and let her speak.
All right.
Yeah, I'm Jeannie Lotz. I've lived in Taos for about 7 years, 3 years off and on. We went back and forth from D.C., and I've been here full-time for 4 years. And I guess part of the reason that I, have gotten involved in this 5G thing is because of how beautiful this area is. I mean, it's a real treasure. It's so unique, and it feels wonderful to be here. And, I've lived in Baltimore, D.C., Phoenix, a lot of different places, and there's no place that has the quality that, or the qualities, I think, that Taos does. So that being said, I kind of heard about 5G just through my own resources, just looking on the web, 5G's coming, it's going to be really bad when there's 5G, blah, 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 blah. And then Reese and I are pretty good friends, and she was telling me about, what was going on with her friend. And then it suddenly occurred to me, oh, my God, this is happening. This thing that everybody's been talking about is happening. And, once you sort of know what the issues are, what can happen, there's no turning away. You either do it or you have to live in a dream world, I kind of feel, and just pretend it's not going to affect you or that it's not happening. So Reese and I were at a meeting where she was discussing, and her friend was discussing what was happening where they were. And we kind of just looked at each other and said, is this our issue? Is this what we should be doing? And I think we both agreed that we should be, and we have been. So that's how it went.
Yes, and I'm Falcon Britt, and it's really Reese and Jeannie that have headed this up. I'm simply on the committee, but with a group of people, we're trying to bring more awareness to the issue. I'm a retired English teacher, taught high school English for 20 years, and one of the main reasons I moved to Taos, this small high desert town surrounded by mountains and forest and beauty, was because it is less radiation influenced. One of the reasons I moved here was because Edmonds, Washington, where I was living, was so full of radiation that I was having pretty strong effects from it. And my cat as well, who actually eventually had to be put down. He could not get well because his cells in his body could not communicate. And it was maddening for me and for him because the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. So when I found out that they're not just going to increase the 4G, which I'm already trying to find ways to cope with shungite and so forth, now they're going to bring 5G possibly as early as spring. Verizon is talking about trying to roll it out here by spring, and AT&T, T-Mobile by midsummer. And so this is something I will have to flee again. But again, where would I flee to? So it's a very important issue for me. It's not one I can sit back and say, oh, let somebody else take care of it. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, that is the attitude that it's just so encouraging to see people beginning to have. It's not just that, as it's tempting for a lot of us to say, it's like, well, great, I'm glad there's some people out there doing that activism thing. I'm just really too busy, and after all, it probably won't affect me. Well, it is going to affect us all. It is already affecting so many of us. I'd like to share a little bit. Later, I'd really appreciate if you would be willing to go into some more detail, Falcon, specifically about the consequences of 4G on the health level as you've experienced them and your cat. And but for right now, I just want to give an overview of some of what's going on in Taos and have Reese and Jeannie fill us in on the strategies that are in place, some of the allies that have come forward. And again, this is a really crucial meeting coming up on June 11th. It's been very well publicized in the Taos area, a meeting of the County Commissioners Council, which will be hearing public comment and testimony before voting to or approve or deny a request put forward by private industry for the installation of additional cell towers, which is primarily to enable the 5G rollout. And so currently, Taos is not in compliance with FCC laws, and this ordinance, if it approved, would establish full compliance and allow 5G towers to be installed unimpeded. And just to give everybody a little bit of an idea about Taos, the political landscape in Taos is very diverse. It's progressives, there's alternatives, there's a large Native American population, and then there's also a big development movement in terms of the ski resort there, and developers moving in are actively working to defend their objectives, which are both pro and con on 5G. So there's just a lot going on. This is really a battleground, a testing ground. Here we have one of the most amazing landscapes in North America, renowned for its beauty, the land of enchantment, and Taos in particular has been known for many years for its beauty, for the Native American spirituality, which is still very tangible there. And so having 5G rolled out with its toxic effect on the biosphere in one of the most beautiful areas in America this is a major moment for the 5G movement to really wake people up. The word is that Capital Telecom has been working hand in glove with the Taos County Planning Development for about 16 months to meet the requirements of the county's land use regulations so that they can roll out 5G. So, Reese and Jeannie, would you give us a little bit of a background on how you see the upcoming meeting, your sense of the growing movement in Taos, and the strategies about what you hope to achieve at the meeting on the 11th?
Well, let's see.
I'm wondering if you want us to start a little bit at the beginning about just sort of how we started.
Yeah, sure. That would be great.
Okay. So, as I remember it, it was just kind of Reese and I getting really very, very, I think, emotionally upset and sort of, just sort of like we couldn't even take it in, like this whole idea of 5G and the network of satellites and how it's all going to be connected throughout the world, and there really would be no place to go. And I think, we started by doing a lot of research. I think that was the most important part for us. We needed to understand it politically, legally, scientifically, all in many, many different ways, because it's very, very layered. So I think the first part of what we did was just spend some time, looking at resources, trying to find credible resources. And I think within that search, we found enough to sort of say, okay, we really need to do something about this. And, we came together, put some things in place at the very beginning, just between her and I, so that when we started to try to get people to join us in fighting this, we would have, a solid base, a base that wasn't based on, a base that wasn't based on any kind of conspiracy or any of those things. I'm not saying that that's not real. I'm not saying that, people don't have a right to their own ideas. We just felt that in order to be legitimized, we needed to stay away from that. And we wanted as many people as possible to join us based on just the safety of the issue and the environmental issues that surround it. So that's kind of where I think we started.
And then what I also want to say is that there is to consider when people are doing research to use different places. Like there's a company called Ecosia, and it's ECOSIA.org, and it's another web search browser which allows you to see more things than what you might see on Google. So that's just another thing to consider is what's your web browser, and if it's outside of the United States, and I'm pretty sure Ecosia is German, not that they might be scrutinizing what they're allowing to come out on their search engines, but they also plant a tree every time you search, so that felt good for me. And so I would say then the next thing what we did was we started to talk to people and friends, and we realized that no one in Taos, or at least very few people that we know that are conscious people in our area, didn't know anything about 5G. So we really knew that the first part of our campaign was just to bring awareness and awakeness to people to just understand the issue from all these different areas that Jeannie was discussing.
So I guess the next step in that was that Reese found a benefactor for us. And, we really didn't, actually, I don't think it was a lot of money, but it's enough to get it got us started. And we decided that, on a name for our organization, which we kind of stole from Santa Fe. And I believe anybody can steal this name. And it's the Taos Alliance for Public Health and Safety. And, you can just kind of use that and attach your town or city to it. So we started that. We got a postcard made. And then what else?
Well, what I wanted to also say about the postcard is that it was a really good way to begin the awareness. And we just picked like 3 top things. Basically 3 top quotes from different organizations that were very credible to have. And it was black and red and white. And we did it through Vistaprint. And it was really pretty inexpensive. And I think we started off with I think we've passed out over probably about 1,800 postcards and gave them to people so that they could just get the awareness out. But then the other thing we did was we started a website, and we just used Wix, W-I-X, and we looked for a political campaign website, and then we transformed it into what it is now, just so that there was someplace someone to go, and then we got a Skype number so that it wasn't impeding all of our personal phone numbers, and that's how we've been managing the first aspect of it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and it's an excellent website, by the way, folks. That's is5gsafe.org and the official name of the website being the Public Alliance for Taos. Good.
Yeah, Taos Alliance for Public Health and Safety.
Right. Excellent name. And I hear what you're saying about, Jeannie, when you were describing the need to, just keep this very mainstream in terms of the outreach, because these are mainstream issues that everybody, regardless of political affiliation or what you may think about, behind the scenes puppeteers, that doesn't matter when it comes to the health of your children, or the survival of the biosphere, or your real estate values, of your property value plummeting because parents don't want to buy a home where there's, a 5G cell tower going up within 100 feet of your home, when there's so much overwhelming evidence of, as a cancer-causing agent and the many other damaging effects. So, that's a really excellent approach, is what we're emphasizing here at Radio 5G, and at our website, 5g-know.com, 5g-know.com, is to let everybody know that this affects all of us, Republican, Democrat, left, right, politically awakened, or just, too stressed out and busy to have noticed. This is going to affect all of us. And so we're doing that emphasis with people on this is about your health, your kids' health. It's about the survival of the biosphere, because as we know, 4G already is deadly to the bee colonies. It's been identified as a factor in bee colony collapse across the world. And 5G is 10 times worse. And so, it's that mainstream approach that is working, that is, waking up people across the spectrum. There's not going to be any hiding from this. It will initially, of course, it's being rolled out. Interestingly enough, like in rural areas, there's a big push because they're assuming, that's where there will be the least resistance. Well, think again. It's already being rolled out in major cities. And I know this is anecdotal evidence, Jeannie, but you were, it may have been Jeannie or Reese yesterday who was sharing with us the effects that are being felt and reported around a major 4G tower having been installed in a alternative health center, I think it was, right in the middle of Taos, and that that person's business is now suffering because people are identifying the toxic effects of 4G. Is that right? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's a healing center and kind of retreat center, and it's in a beautiful location just near downtown Taos. And unfortunately, when she bought the property and transformed it, Kit Carson had not installed a massive 4G tower with so many panels on it that and wires that are like, I would say like a good inch circumference, like electrifying it. And so she bought this many, many years ago, transformed it, has been doing her business. And now people that are working there are not feeling well. People that are coming there to get, healing services don't feel well about coming. And I kept saying, well, maybe she should move. And it wasn't until just this last week that I realized that she had bought that property years and years ago. And I'm telling you, nobody's going to want to come in there. And the business is suffering because a lot of the employees don't want to work there because it's too intense.
Yeah, and there are growing reports of, for example, with TSA nationally, the Transportation Safety Agency, where they're having a shortage of employees, and it's not just because it's normal turnover, it's because so many of them are getting cancer because of the 5G technology that is now being installed, that has been installed for some time in the security apparatus that all of us have to go through. That's another aspect of this, is that there's not going to be any escaping this at a certain point. If you're spending time in airports, schools, major office buildings in which, which are blanketed in 5G radiation, you are exposed. And so this is a great opportunity in Taos to show everybody an awakened and active community, bringing out the scientific facts and directly bringing them to the public body responsible for approving or holding off on the 5G rollout. And win or lose, and I'm optimistic with the amazing work that you all are doing there. I'm optimistic and hopeful that we will have a positive outcome in Taos on the county commissioners meeting on the 11th. But win or lose, this will be documented, and having undeniable information presented in a public forum to the responsible commissioners with a very clear warning to them. I mean, in a friendly way. These are public servants. These aren't the enemy. These are good people who just need the information. And as Nancy has pointed out before, they need to know that their plausible deniability of being able to say, well, we approved it, but we just didn't know. That's gone now. And that will be noted to them. Your plausible deniability is over as of this moment. In this public forum, you have been given the information by credible experts that this is a major, documented public health threat. I understand we have Dr. Sharon Goldberg, who testified before Congress on the dangers of 5G, lined up. Is that right, Reese? Do we have Dr. Goldberg?
Yes. Yeah, she'll be coming, and because her clip was used in the 5G Apocalypse documentary by Sasha Stone, she had been getting many, many calls, and to my very surprise, there was another woman who was an attorney who was shown testifying, and she has an organization called wearetheevidence.com or .org. And she gave me Sharon's email address, and Sharon lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is just about a little less than 2 hours away. And she said that because we lived in her state and that we called her, we were the only people she said yes to testify again, because she's very busy doing research.
Right.
That is. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say a couple of things that I think are really important from what you were saying. When Reese and I were getting together, we decided also that we wanted to be for something rather than against something, and that we also needed to realize, even though it was really hard at first, that these our county officials, our town officials are not our enemy. They are doing a job. They are. The FCC has stated what they need to do, and they are just getting things in compliance. Now, I don't think they know a whole lot about it, and that's where Reese and I come in terms of educating. But, we've decided also that they're just like us. They have families. They have businesses here. They have, people have, the mayor of the city runs a logging mill, so where's he going to, what's going to happen to his trees, things like that. It's all really gets down to a very personal level for all of us. So I think that's an important attitude to take when, you decide how you're going to move forward in this process.
Yes, very much. And Nancy has shared with me some days ago a template that you drew up, Nancy, for an approach to take to local officials, town officials, county officials, or even at the state level, in that same spirit, and yet being very straightforward, saying, yes, okay, we assume that you are a public spirited person who has taken time out of your life. And especially in a situation like Taos, where the county commissioners, these aren't political fat cats, sitting in a long-term situation where they've got a gerrymandered congressional district they're just going to be reelected to with, help from their usual suspects in the fat cat donor department. These, as you say, Jeannie, these are local people. They don't get a huge stipend for serving as county commissioners, and they are members of the community. They have families and businesses that are going to be at risk as well. And I think this is, part of why action on the local level, which is happening all across the country and the world to stop 5G at this point, is so crucial and is really where the action is. Nancy, is there anything you'd like to share with us about that approach and the template that you shared with us?
Well, right now, what I would like to do is to ask Reese and Jenny to explain to us, well, actually, we probably should talk to Falcon, because she's the one that had the actual experience at the 4G level. Now, and I want to ask you specifically, Falcon, when you began to understand what was really making you and your cat sick, and you started to talk to people, did you run into that cognizant dissonance and I really don't want to know and I'm going to put my head back in the sand? Or by that time, were you getting people that began to understand what was happening? And can you tell us what you were feeling?
At that point, the inability of my cells to communicate with one another began to just degrade everything. It was affecting, I felt like I had the flu all the time, and I had depression, and I had brain fog, and all kinds of symptoms that were just, and the cat was the same way, and we couldn't get him well for over a year, and at the cost of $800, I kept taking him back to the vet, and they would try things, and nothing was working, and he was in severe pain. And, of course, the doctors, this was the main people I was talking to, and with them, they didn't want to hear about it. They, in the traditional medical model, automatically just, oh, well, she must be a kook. That was the energy I was getting from them. They didn't say that, but it was kind of like, oh, well, she must be some kind of hypochondriac, because that's what they assume. If they can't slap a label on it and throw a pill at it, then, you must be crazy. That's especially if you're a woman. So it was extremely frustrating. Eventually, one thing that they did identify was a parathyroid adenoma, which is not a cancer, but kind of a cancer, a tumorous thing, and they took that out surgically. And I do wonder whether that was caused by the radiation. But of course, it did not solve the problem enough. I eventually discovered antennasearch.com. And when I put in on antennasearch.com, you can put in your address, and it will tell you how many antennas are radiating near your house within 2 miles and how many towers. And I looked, and there were 147 antennas within 2 miles of my house.
Oh, my God.
Because Edmonds is very forward-thinking. It's right north of Seattle, and they're very tech-happy up there. That's the home of Microsoft. And I was also within a few miles of Everett Naval Base. And as you know, that's military stuff going on there. And Whidbey Island Air Force Base is where they send out, which it was, of course, right across the sound from me, within a couple of miles. That's where they send up the planes that jam radar and do the electronic warfare, those planes. So I gradually began to be aware of all those influences, and it all added up when I started looking at all the symptoms, the nervousness, the anxiety, the inability to sleep, and all of it cumulatively. And I thought, I got to get out of here. That's the only conclusion. I didn't know anything, of course, about shungite, and I was living in an apartment where the Wi-Fi, everybody's Wi-Fi was above me, below me, and on each side of me. So there was not much escape there. So I came to a rural area, and Taos is it. And I don't want to see this happen. It was very frustrating trying to work with the medical establishment because it's not in their training. So that's what happened with me.
Let me just mention that there are doctors out there that now get it, and there is a movement. But of course, you didn't have that at the time.
Not in my small town, yeah.
Now, when you finally, excuse me, so you did make a move away from there to Taos, and when you got to Taos, what did you feel once you got there? Did you feel a relief? Was there an immediate change in your physiology and your psychology?
It was astonishing. It was astonishing how different I felt. I thought, oh my gosh, if I had realized this, I would have moved so much sooner. In fact, I felt it as soon as I got out of town. Once I got several hours out away from Seattle, which was where I moved out from with my stuff, I felt amazingly much better. And then just gradually my whole system began to improve because my cells could communicate again. My nervous system could function right, and the organs could start functioning and communicating. All the systems of the body, everything began to improve. And I've been a joyous little critter since I got down here. I don't know how else to say
Well,
it.
just be aware that they do now understand from a medical standpoint exactly what's happening to the body. So, again, doctors who, I'm talking to the audience out there, doctors who say to you you're crazy or look at you like you're crazy, you have got to get to, and we'll give you the links. It was a video that was done that I was absolutely dumbfounded about the details that they have now about the understanding of what this is doing to the physical body. We all have to get understanding this, and believe me, I'm trying to figure it out myself, so that we can say to these practitioners, no, you don't understand. You have got to look at blah, 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 because even if you don't completely understand this stuff yourself, if you get the terminology, their terminology, so that you don't sound like a kook. You're talking their language. Okay,
Yeah.
that's just a kind of a learning thing that I've discovered. So when you got there, the immediate effects, even just getting out of the area, and this is why I'm harping on this, because people, this is so absolutely provable. You're sick as a dog, your animals are dying, and you move, 50 miles away, and all of a sudden everybody's feeling better. This cannot be disputed.
Yes.
So when you got to now, you said that all of a sudden you found out that the 5G was coming into play. Is that right? Or you found it out because of the postcard that Reese and Jenny had sent out?
Yes.
It was the postcard?
How did you find out about it?
Yeah, it was one of the cards I saw at the local grocery store on the bulletin board.
Okay, so there's another thing, is that people, you see, we've got a situation where Falcon was already wounded. She knew the problem. And so how many other people are really out there that at least feel the same symptoms? They may not understand it. And so if you just reach out with a postcard, you're going to start bringing these people in. People are ready to hear the message, is what I think I'm saying, because it's gotten, ever since they upgraded to the 4G, they didn't call it, they upgraded to the 4G, and that it made it even more damaging. So at this point, we've got many, many more people really wounded from this situation. So anybody out there that if you by yourself are feeling this, that I've got to do something, then start going to places where you can post a postcard saying, please contact me if you're having these symptoms. And make your own group. You will come together. Okay? And
Nancy, you're so right. That research is out there. There was a big meta-analysis done by a large group of very respected scientists out of Tomsk, Russia. They analyzed over 50,000 studies on the effects of radiation. And so that evidence is very solid. There's evidence from the NIH, the toxicology subdivision under them, and many doctors, respected MDs, PhDs with Harvard educations are speaking out about this now. It is not a fringe movement by kooks. There's solid evidence that's being ignored in the name of profits, in my opinion.
Right.
no,
I think the telecommunication company seems to be romancing us into believing that this is sort of like the next step in our evolution, and that we're going to have the Internet of Things. And, it's very frightening when you look at it in that way,
Meanwhile, there's no one that will insure them. Lloyd's of London won't insure them against lawsuits for the medical effects. I find that interesting.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason when you have countries, cities like Amsterdam and Geneva and Brussels and Rome that are saying, no, we will not have this in our city until it's proven safe. And that's what we're asking. We're simply saying, when it is proven safe, bring it forward. But until then, why should all of our children be guinea pigs? Why should our people, the people that radiation affects most is those in utero. This is not a simple minor experiment.
No, this is another critical aspect of it, is that we could go back to the Nuremberg codes and the legality of it, but this is a question of morality. Just because you got laws, the FCC telling you have to be in compliance doesn't mean that's a moral law. We have got to talk to the people that, unfortunately for them, I suspect right now, are embroiled in being the government that is being forced by all these regulations, fear tactics. You have got to do this, or we're going to. I don't even know what they threaten them with. And money and fines and all of this stuff. And so I'm assuming that you've already tried to reach out to your local government people. What was their response to you?
Well, I'll tell you, Jeannie and I went to, the first place we went was to a city council meeting, and we put ourselves up on the agenda, and the first thing that the mayor said to us, and it was I tried not to take it personally, but hey, G5 girls, why don't you come up? And I mean, I'm going to be 53. Jeannie's 60 something. And we're definitely not the G5 girls. And we immediately told them, no, we're discussing 5G cellular technology that will be coming to Taos. And do you know anything about it? And none of them on the city council, including the mayor, knew anything. The only person that had some knowledge was our city manager. Right. And so it was a little frustrating. And then at some point, one of the city councilors, a young man, said to us that we sounded hysterical, like the women who were trying to fight their children not being vaccinated. And I just was floored and said, this has nothing to do with vaccinations. This has to do with 5G cellular technology and the dangers of that.
Right. I mean, I kind of had a different experience with them. I thought they were open. And, you know, they were sort of trying to hear us out. But there were a couple that you could tell were sort of not on our side immediately. And particularly the one that asked us, he said, now, if you're going to have a meeting in front of us, you need to have experts here. I don't want people hurt, like the vaccination situation. And, you know, I said, look, if you think we're hysterical, why don't you do some research? And I can point you to some things that might give you an overview very quickly of what the issues are here. And, you know, and since then, Reese and I have had an opportunity. We were trying to meet with the county planning and zoning, I think, board, and we happened to walk into the mayor's office, or where the city councilors work, and the city manager was there, and he came out and talked to us, and we had a really good conversation. I felt like he was, you know, right after we left, I guess, after we had our meeting with them, they got with their attorney immediately, because I kind of sort of went off script and I started to talk about how we might be able to sue them if they, you know,
personally responsible.
Yeah, they would be personally responsible. So they got with their lawyer, and they made the city manager in charge of learning all about 5G. He is coming to our meeting he's coming to the county meeting on June 11th. You know, so I think we did have an impact, and, you know, I kind of expected sort of like a brush off, you know, or sort of like, you know, these are people that might be a little bit nuts, but, you know, I just felt like, so what, you know, so what? You're going to be a victim of this, just like I'm going to be a victim of this, and you need to know what's going to happen. And even though I feel like it's their responsibility to educate themselves, and they're not, I don't mind doing that part, because, you know, 8-10 weeks ago, I didn't know anything, you know, so that's kind of how I felt about that meeting. And Reese and I sort of had a different experience, but I think we both sort of walked away feeling like, hey, we had done something valuable. So
the key here is that we actually don't have to prove the case of the dangers. They have to prove to us it's safe.
Right.
And there is no proof of that. Now, if there's no proof of that, then can we just stop everything and do the research in a certifiable, not paid for by the telecommunications company or any of that, to prove it? And, of course, it will never be proven.
Right.
I mean, that's the key, is that if you can... Now, I've had to deal with local government, so I so understand where you are with this right now. But my experience is that they are good people that just need to have the information. Have you had any more interaction with the manager to know which way he's going?
No, we kind of asked him off the record what he felt, you know, how did he feel about it? And I mean, you know, of course, you know, he was not going to play all his cards, I don't think, and let us know. But I think he was really doing research. I pointed him in a direction, or we both pointed him in different directions of where to go to sort of start getting information that wasn't biased, you know. So, and I think he heard us. But you just never know. You just don't know. And I understand what you're saying about they have to prove it to us. And that is part of our petition when we asked that we sort of said, like, let's not move forward until the FCC has changed its standards. We just want the FCC to take all the scientific, medical, environmental information into account before they implement it. And that's really our request. You kind of get lost in all this stuff and you actually have to sit down and think, what are we asking? And do we have a clear message of what we want?
A moratorium.
Yeah. And we ask for a moratorium until the FCC standards have been changed.
Okay.
Or at least
One of the problems with that concept, okay, is when did the FCC become responsible for the health implications of any of this? This is an FDA. This is in the FDA jurisdiction. The FCC should have nothing to do with this, and this is part of the problem. Is that you're going to run into it. And yes, of course, I'm a conspiracy person, but I also understand how we have to approach the average person who is not our enemy. They're our neighbors, our family. We have got to make them understand the dangers of this thing. But at the same time, there is so much activity to just continually brainwash people. They need this, they need this, they need this. Are you running up against that? Because I know that somehow or another they tied it to the 911 system.
That's exactly right. Yes, that's what they told us.
That's what they told us.
And, we have an expert, a guy named Tim Shokel, and he's going to be testifying at the meeting. And he wrote a report. I think it's for the National Public Policy Center, and it's called Reinventing Wires. And his argument is that we already have the infrastructure, and we should
fiber optics.
With fiber optics, and that we should be using that, and it's much better. So he's going to be testifying about that. It's just such a big job I think, anyway, I experience this sometimes where you just feel overwhelmed. How am I going to get all this information to them? So I think what we sort of decided through our process, maybe never verbally, but we just sort of decided, okay, we're going to work locally. Let the cities that are, have already filed suit, that it's being reviewed in the Ninth Circuit right now of appeals. We're going to let them do that level, and we're just going to work locally. That's, because it gets too big, I think.
Yes, and that, when we look at what's happening with the FCC, to expect that they're going to change their standards of what is acceptable, they raise the standards hundreds of times above what other countries, European countries, have determined are acceptable safety standards, and those standards were already documented with 4G to be causing serious health issues. So the FCC, and again, as Nancy says, not a health agency, a medical agency, they raise the standards hundreds of times above what is already known to be, cancer-causing risks, in order to accommodate the big telecom companies. The FCC is a captive agency of the industry it is supposed to police. It is run by former major executives in telecom companies, and, just the idea that those guys or women, whomever they are, who are in charge of the FCC, the idea that they're going to say, oh, gee, it turns out to have health risks, I guess we'd better bring the standards back down to where it's going to be something closer to safe. That's not likely to happen anytime soon, especially within the window of time that we have, to make a difference, which is why what you're doing in Taos is so important, and it's we're seeing it across the country in many other cities and towns and around the world, that this local action of everyone banding together and saying no, and all of the tools that are being brought forward whereby using the precautionary principle, and that applies across many areas of law, international law, that the precautionary principle, as we were just talking about, is okay, there appear to be some concerns. So until independent studies have been done to determine it's safe, let's stop it. The moratorium must be put in place. And of course, once a precautionary principle is invoked, and you start to do some studies, it's open and shut, slam dunk. This is absolutely toxic, and there's massive evidence demonstrating that it is. You're not going to have an authentic independent study that is not funded by big telecom that will conclude that. So this is really where the action is exactly what you're doing, and happening across the country and the world. That's what's going to turn the tide.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a system, and you have to do it city by city, county by county. You can just forget about anything that the federal government is saying, because this is their first. We know that they don't even have a right to be doing what they're doing, but just keep it out of your way. Forget it. You are an independent city, county. Work right there. Because it's a system. If we can stop it there, now yes, they have the satellites, but if they can't get it on the ground and working, the whole thing is going to collapse on them. So it is every single town, and I'm screaming at you, please. I've been at this for 45 years. This has been something that has been, they're marching this out quicker than they should, because it's a control mechanism for everybody. We don't have to address that at the local level. We only have to say, look it, please, this is going to kill us all. And there is so much documentation that they can't really fight back. So at that point, what are we working with? We're working with people who actually have, it's a dysfunction in their brain. They cannot imagine this.
Right.
You're confronting the same thing, right? In yourselves. You start out and you go, oh my gosh, this can't be true. Well, this is insane. So they call you insane people because their minds are so locked into the control mechanism in our schools, in the televisions. Every Ford commercials is for the Internet of Things. All of this is programming them. So when you go and you're talking to these people, it's not surprising that the two of you saw the same situation and had a different interpretation of it. Because in many ways, this is forcing us as just human beings to look at the rest of humanity and say, what are you thinking?
Right. Yeah.
But they're all brain fogged.
Thinking, which is really scary. They're just not thinking.
They're brain fogged. They're already succumbing to the 4G. And for whatever reasons, some of us have been protected at least enough so that our brains continue to work. And, I just, you got to try to give the people as much insight into the local guy and girl that are there to be government in service, or they're in an ego trip. They want to be the big frog in a small pond. But how can other people be prepared for what you encountered? You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people, they learn this and they go, well, Mark Steele from Britain, he was that way. He realized the problem and he says, the government officials they don't seem to understand this. He goes to them to try to explain it to him. They called him a terrorist and arrested him.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now he's gone through a number of court cases. It's all right. Everything it came out, best it could have. But the thing of it is I want people to be aware that when you go to your city council, you are going to get a lot of blowback. And how to respond to that so that when you walk in there, you walk in knowing what you're talking about. And to make it simple, because these people don't have the capacity in their brains right now because of the 4G fog and all of the mind control programming that's going on to understand that this could possibly even be in existence. You're telling us we're building a system that's going to kill us all? Why would we do that? They can't get that could possibly be. So could you just talk about, actually we're getting toward the end of the hour here, but just kind of give us that information, if you can, to prepare people.
Well, I would say one thing is don't go alone. I mean,
Yeah.
because Jeannie was there at that particular meeting, she kept giving me the perspective of just let it go. They just really don't understand and they don't have the full picture. And they are people right now with heads in their sand. And I mean, I've got to admit it, like I wasn't on top of my game about 5G. I ran a nonprofit organization in New Mexico for 8 years called Sustainable Global Leadership Alliance, where I trained young adults to be leaders for global sustainability. And here, this is like a major issue. And, I tend to be a person that tries to not do too much news. And, so it just kind of went by me because I do live in a rural community that doesn't have good cell phone service. I live 5 miles from a tower or further, probably 10 miles. And so I just didn't even catch it until February. So I guess where I needed to have compassion for other people who aren't awake yet to the reality, and Jeannie having her with me gave both of us courage, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I really do. I mean, I think that was, I was already nervous because I'm not a great public speaker anyway, and I tend to get a little tremble, and I feel like I'm going to faint and all that stuff, But when I got in front of them, something happened. Like I just got sort of, I don't know, what was it? Feisty. I got feisty. I just thought, and I felt like it was good to get feisty because, when that one guy said to us, oh, we only want experts that are going to, talk about, they better be good experts because we don't want people that are going to get hurt. I just looked at him and I was just like, I was thinking, like, you are so, I hate to say this, you are so uninformed. And I had another word for it. And it made me really angry. And I just thought, don't you dare try to do this to us, And I said to him, you need to look at some studies. You need to actually do some of your own research. It's not up to us. I mean, it is up to us in a sense, but you have to take responsibility because you are a public servant. And that's when I sort of went into the, we can sue you and you and you and you, and I was kind of pointing my finger at them. And I think that sort of woke them up a little bit. But in terms of,
I love your feistiness.
Well, I didn't know where it came from. I got to say, I was just kind of freaked when I was done. I thought, where did that come from? But, it is of course, this is our world we're talking about and, everything in it and me and my friends and everyone I love and all the nature that I love. So, I guess it sort of comes from a primal spot, maybe. I don't know, but it was definitely there. And I don't know how to tell people to get prepared for that attitude. I kind of like what you're saying, which is that, okay. Do we need to take a break right now?
Yeah, we're at the top of the hour, and we're gonna need to take a little 3 or 4 minute break. And when we come back, they wanted you to bring experts, and you actually did. And we've got some really highly qualified experts who are going to testify. And I'd love to cover, when we get back, how we can use what you're doing in Taos. It will be filmed. How we can share tools and laws and the video of all this expert testimony so that everybody listening in across the country and the world can begin to take this local action. And we'll be back in about 4 minutes, right, Nancy? Oh. Welcome back to Radio 5G. Michael Henry Dunn with my co-host Nancy Hopkins and our wonderful group of guests, 3 remarkable women who are spearheading the movement in the Taos, New Mexico area to wake everyone up to 5G. Welcome back. Reese Jula, Falcon Britt, and Jeannie Lotz. And Jeannie, you were just, when we took the break, were responding to Nancy and sharing with her some of your appreciation for what she had been saying about what people can expect when they go to their local officials. So if you want to pick up where you were, we can resume our conversation.
Okay. I guess what I was responding to is I don't know how to tell people what to expect or how to respond, except that I think the most important things is that you are very direct with them and that, don't, I mean, I hate to say this, but don't let them get you down. You know, you got to you got to just remember what you're fighting for and how important it is. And you know, I kind of felt like after that meeting, I didn't really care what they thought of me. It's not about me, and I don't care if they think I'm a conspiracy theorist or not. You know, I just am here to provide information, to educate as much as I can, and then people have to make their own decision. You know, that is really all I can do. And I think Reese and I have reached that point several times where we feel like, oh my God, we've got so much to say and so much to do, and we're not going to be able to do it, but we're just doing what we can, and the rest will have to kind of take care of itself. I hate to say that, but, you know, we're just maybe 20, 25 people here in Taos, and everybody's working hard, and, you know, you have to sort of remember that. And so that's sort of how, you know, I've approached it. But I do think that some sort of harsh, sort of in-your-face language is not a bad thing. You know?
Can I just jump in here for a minute? Because the only time I had to, well, I've done it a number of times, but locally in my own neighborhood, we fought zoning. You know, people going to churches in and as resorts, all sorts of things. I live in South Florida, okay, and what we found to be the most effective way of addressing government officials is to do it in unison. So what we would do was like, okay, it was just a zoning question, but we had like 12 people who stood up with us at the zoning commission meeting. But we had a set script of what we wanted to present. And each person was responsible for delivering that portion of the script. Okay. So what happened was that the first person got, because in a lot of these things you have to sign up and say that you want to talk about this, right? So you get a list of people and they only give you 5 minutes or something, right? That's the way that normally you see these things. Well, what happens is that the first person says their spiel, and we actually had it so we could read until they stopped us. And then the next person would start exactly where the first person had stopped. And they would say it until they stopped him again. And then, so you got an amazing amount of information presented on the record by a whole bunch of different people. But it was the same message. It wasn't people getting up there and getting nervous and not remembering what they're supposed to. It was absolutely organized. And the response from the commission, the zoning commission, was, what organization are you people? We're not an organization. We're just people in the neighborhood. And they had never seen anybody present anything like this to them. And they immediately agreed with us.
Well, I think that sounds like a great idea. And I know that Reese and I have been trying to formulate how we were going to present it. One of our issues is because we have these experts and we would like them to have time to talk. The way I understand the county meeting to work is that you go in, and if a lot of people sign up to talk, well, then the experts don't get to say their spiel. I mean, they get maybe 5 minutes. What we were going to try to do, and maybe after listening to what you say, we need to rethink this, but maybe we were going to try to restrict people, like saying, like, don't sign up to talk. What we want to do is have our experts testify. So, and then maybe, 4 or 5 people talk, at the end or whatever. So what do you think of that strategy?
Well, I would get with your experts, okay, because they're going to have a lot more to say than the 5 minutes that they can say it in.
Right,
and,
I know.
I mean, the doctor, when she got up before Congress, she said, I can't believe you're only giving me 5 minutes. Right. She was stunned. So go to your experts and say, please present us with your entire message. And we will get it so that your message, even though they cut you off, will continue.
Oh, great idea! Great idea.
So you get the official certified authorities to start presenting it, but then the rest of you tell the rest of the story.
Right. Yes, perfect.
Okay. Great idea. Yeah. And actually, the whole story is kind of an interesting concept, because when we've talked about putting together a dossier for people at the meeting, the county commissioners, and maybe for the city also, the city council, we really want to start telling a story. We're starting with the FAA ruling, or the FCC, getting their power in 1996, and how that has evolved to this other organization. I think it's CITA, that has really helped sort of put these laws through the state, sort of crafted them, really just subterfuge kind of things, and sort of paint a picture for them. That's, that's of course based on.
That's a dangerous move.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, because what'll happen to the people is that they'll feel like they're being presented a history lesson, and they'll go non-zone. They'll zone out on you. What you have to do is you have to make it like you're doing a military briefing to the general. General, we have got to defend this particular area right now because this is what's happening right now. Because you can go back and you can fill in those empty things. Because once they go, oh my God, how did we get into this situation? Then you can say, well, you got there because.
Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying.
You have to keep it very, very focused. There is nobody on the face of the earth that can make anybody do something that is immoral, inhumane, and absolutely insane. Okay, I mean, that's where we're at, right?
Yes,
and so you present it that way, please. Listen to us. Listen to our authorities here. And I know the woman, the doctor that you're talking about, simply because I've seen that clip so many times. And I do believe that if you go to her, she's probably got a whole spiel that she could give you. Mm-hmm. Work with your because this also will be a presentation for her. Instead of her being asked to go to all these different places, you have you can film all of this and you can present it in not necessarily to government officials, but to train other people how to do it.
Right.
So I would engage her right now.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, don't leave her out there by herself, because you do it as a group. We've got to come together like a team.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Not an organization, a team.
Yeah. Right.
And keep it specific to your own locale. We take them down one peg at a time. Okay.
Well, that's good advice. Very good advice, and I thank you for that.
I have a question. Nancy, one of the people that is on the Kit Carson board had requested peer-reviewed evidence. We were discussing smart meters at the time. And one of the best sites I've found is called justproveit.net. They have over 1,100 and some studies on the effects of it, and they're just very brief summaries of what it does to the human body. But did you have any other sites to recommend, particularly that would not overwhelm, but educate in a concise way when they ask for these kinds of things?
Yes, we can recommend very much ehtrust.org, environmentalhealthtrust.org, has excellent sources and research, very well organized site there. That would be my top recommendation. Jeannie or Reese, have you also have good resources that you'd recommend?
I think the one that I've seen is Electric Sense, like at least in terms of understanding some of the science behind it. That was important for me. So I spent a lot of time on that because I couldn't figure out how much higher, how much more radiation we would receive than our current cell phone technology, because we get that question a lot, like how is it different than 4G, So I've used that. And what else have you used?
The Children's Health Defense.
Oh, right, that's a good one. Yeah.
And then we are the evidence. I'm pretty sure it's wearetheevidence.org, and she was the other person that was testifying, and her name was Davina.
I cannot remember.
Yes. So
yeah. And I've looked at the one that you mentioned, Michael, and we get people that send us stuff, on the website. So we do have a lot of resources that we can sort of tap into. I just haven't had the time in the last week or so. But we will get there. Yeah.
Okay. One note about Dr. Sharon Goldberg, a correction I need to make. I had said earlier that she testified in front of Congress. That video clip that's being shared, she is actually testifying in front of the Michigan State Legislature, not the U.S. Congress. And that was on October 4th of 2018 regarding their small cell tower legislation hearing. And that there's a website called electrosmogprevention.org. Again, that's electrosmogprevention.org. We'll share the link with you, in which she is featured. That clip of her testimony is featured. I'd like to just read a little bit of the blurb accompanying that clip on this website, electrosmogprevention.org. She testified about why 5G should not be rolled out and the association. I mean, this could help with the story, right? Of course, it's a great thing. She'll be there to present it personally. But the association between exposure to microwave RF radiation and blood sugar, diabetes, congestive heart failure, and cancer. She's a board-certified internal medicine physician with several decades of experience. She's a teacher at a large number of medical schools, a researcher with an interest in extensive knowledge regarding the science behind exposure to EMF and health. And at the clip shows that the legislators were very poorly informed about RF radiation and health effects, very poorly educated in the sciences, surprise, surprise, given what's happening to the American education system. And one doubtful legislature mentioned, well, hey, the American Cancer Society is still claiming there's no association between wireless and cancer. And Dr. Goldberg explained that some organizations have conflicts of interest, surprise, surprise. And she had to explain what that meant too. Though these legislatures knew all about it, and subsequently they voted in favor of industry-friendly 5G legislation by a vote of 15-4. I just wanted to give that background on Dr. Goldberg and to clarify that it was the Michigan legislature she presented in front of and not Congress, because it's important for us not to be, caught out in these small mistakes, which can potentially, do a little minor credibility damage. It's important that we have our facts straight. So I apologize for the earlier information about Congress. It was the Michigan State Legislature for Dr. Goldberg. So
can I get in here for a second? I wanted to suggest something. There are, I think, 10,000 different studies, peer-reviewed, certified. Top-of-the-notch studies out there. You'll see them listed sometimes. But what I suggest you do is to try to compile, not information about them, but just compile a list of them. And then you print those out and make it as long as you can. And before you go before that commission, say, we would like to submit this as evidence. These are certifiable, peer-reviewed studies that have been done explaining the dangers of electromagnetic and RF signals, okay? Because when they visually see how many studies we have to say it's dangerous, and you can say, can you please provide us one that says it's good?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's a matter.
Very good. I like that one.
Okay, yeah. It's a matter of getting in their faces and saying, and then once you've presented that, can you please just give us one peer-reviewed, certified, non-telecommunications, paid-for report that says this is safe? Just one. Okay. And if you can't, well, then you are officially been notified that you no longer can say you didn't know.
Okay.
And just leave it there. Don't threaten them. Because they damn well know what it means to be in that position, because you've already told them you're going to be legally at fault, and they know it. Mm-hmm. When you told that first guy, you told them all.
Yeah. I don't know if I like that reputation, but yeah.
Own it, darling.
Own it, sister.
I will. I will.
The other thing I wanted to also say, I have a friend who is actually a land law attorney here in Taos, and where she created a resolution for the county as a possibility for them and for the city. And the resolution states, a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of Taos County affirming its authority under the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution to exercise its police powers over zoning and other land use matters in order to protect the citizens of Taos County from the known effects of electromagnetic radiation. So that's what she's going to actually present to that as an option, that they could reinstate their police powers under the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that is potentially so useful across the country, Reese. I'm really so glad to see that happening and that you brought that forward, because that's what it has to come back to. We have to claim our rights under the Constitution. And the documentary that we're familiar with, 5G Apocalypse from Sasha Stone, I mean, you see White House officials and FCC officials blatantly, explicitly saying, yeah, well, there's this 10th Amendment issue, but it's time to just, brush that aside. Sorry, folks, that's our Constitution, the one that you swore to uphold and defend, and we're claiming our rights under it. This isn't about any, radical, wild-eyed conspiracy theory movement. We're just American citizens, and you're about to put in this toxic system around our homes, and we're invoking our rights under the Constitution and the 10th Amendment to say no. And that's just such a powerful tool across the country. If enough groups get together, enough people get together, enough tools of this kind are brought to bear, at a certain point, it's not going to matter how much BS we get thrown at us by corporate media, where you see the New York Times actually coming out with, I'm embarrassed for them. I used to read that paper a long time ago when they still had some credibility, actually coming out with an editorial and saying, your 5G cell phone won't hurt you, but the Russians want you to think it will.
What
come on.
What propaganda is that?
Yeah, that is just so over the top. And to be able to just blatantly ignore the thousands of peer-reviewed studies, to blatantly ignore the cities and towns, municipalities, states, provinces across America and Europe and elsewhere that are rising up and saying no. And then that's followed up, of course. The Wall Street Journal chimes in with a similar piece of blatant propaganda. It's just becoming so over the top that, right, unless you're some Wall Street executive with his head buried in the Journal on his subway, you've got to start seeing this. And so this is just a huge tool that you're bringing forward about the 10th Amendment. I'm really looking forward to
not only is it important, I think it's critical. So what I recommend you do is that the first person that speaks is the lawyer. And the lawyer sets it up and says, look you have this option to stand up for the people under the 10th Amendment. And this is why you need to do it. Then have the doctor come on, give her spiel, and then all those other people that have signed up to continue the doctor's presentation.
Okay.
All right, because what's going to happen is that already you've given the council an out. Oh.
Yes.
Oh, okay. And then you give them the reason for activating it. Just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Nancy, this is a wonderful document that I think could possibly be used in other areas with some minor modifications. It starts out with 2 pages of whereas this and whereas that, and then it goes into the 8 points of the resolution.
Can you read those? Can you read those 8 points? Is it that long? Or I think it's important for people to understand they do have a way of dealing with this.
Okay. Well, I'll skip over all the whereases, which are pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Okay, be it resolved, therefore, Taos County, number one, through the exercise of its police powers, has the authority to enact land use regulations to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens. Number two, Taos County currently regulates the placement of cell phone towers and other equipment used by the telecommunications industry through its land use regulations in order to ensure adequate setbacks from residential structures, schools, other private property. Number three, Taos County asserts control over its public ways through franchise agreements and other means so that private industry and utility companies do not have unfettered discretion to place equipment and telecommunications infrastructure on land which Taos County holds in trust for the public at large. Number four, Taos County asserts its authority as delegated by the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and the state of New Mexico over land use within the county, including the placement of 5G antenna, towers, and other equipment. Number five, the Board of Commissioners of Taos County directs its planning department to implement local ordinances that regulate the placement of 5G antenna, towers, and equipment, similar to existing regulations for cell towers, to ensure the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of all Taos County citizens, especially children, the elderly, and the disabled. Number six, the Board of County Commissioners in Taos County further directs the county attorney to review and amend existing franchise agreements to ensure that the placement of 5G antenna, towers, and equipment will not violate the public trust. Number seven, the Board of Commissioners of Taos County declares that it is subject to the federal law known as the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and that it will abide by this act in the review and authorization of any 5G infrastructure within Taos County in order to protect the rights of the disabled, including but not limited to those suffering from autoimmune disease, epilepsy, heart disease, or cancer. And since we also know it worsens diabetes, we should add that one in too. Number eight, Taos County further supports the increased study of 5G technology on human health as well as on plants, insects, and animals. And then, of course, at the end, approved by the Board of Commissioners in Taos County this day of blah, blah, blah.
That's brilliant. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
That's fantastic.
We've got to make this available to everybody out there because it's a set legal presentation of what each city can do. Claim your rights again. And then the only thing that the telecommunications people can do is end up in Supreme Court. It's a constitutional question. Do you know how long it takes to get to the Supreme Court? By then, we can hopefully have made people enough aware that they wouldn't even, no, we're not even going to bother with that. We're just not going to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Nancy, I've been hearing that they won't put a stay on installation while they're arguing the case. So even though some cities are in the Ninth Circuit of Appeals now, the judge did not agree to a stay on installation of the hardware. So that was kind of weird to me. So they're putting all this stuff in, even though, it hasn't really reached its conclusion in the Ninth Circuit of Appeals, You
just have to do it every city by city. You have to jam up the court systems. Okay, now the other thing you might want to look at, and I hope we don't have to go there, but there is the concept of individuals going down and making police reports against assault.
Yeah.
Okay, because it is a legal. There are places that are doing this. That they're saying, okay, so you don't want to do anything for us. Well, then I'm going to have to do something for myself. I'm physically under assault. I am making a police record, and the people that are responsible for that is the government.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Or the telecom companies, yeah.
Well, one of the fascinating items I came across is that some of the fine print, when you allow these 5G towers antenna to be put on your building or on your land, in some of the fine print it reads that you will be held liable for the medical issues that arise from that, and not the telecommunications company.
Oh, you have to make that paramount too. Because again. All right, well, what are we up against? We're up against people who want to save their jobs. They want to save a semblance of stability because they don't want the applicant, that kind of people. You have basically got to put them in a condition where they have an excuse to do the right thing. And the excuse is, if you don't do it, darling, you're going to jail.
Right.
All right? So it's a matter of giving them every way out for whatever reason to just stop it. If we can just stop it and buy ourselves some time to educate the rest of the population. Yeah. But they want to get this on so that you guys, they turn it on and you're going to go, what were we doing?
Right. Right. That's the part for me, yeah.
And by the way, it's Australia where this definition of 5G as meeting the criminal definition of assault, that your health and peace are being disturbed within your home by an outside party. That is being successfully applied in a number of places in Australia where people are filing criminal charges against telecom companies or the local government for allowing it, for criminal assault. And it's pretty hard to argue with the idea that this does meet the criminal definition of assault. I mean, if somebody is, without your permission and against your will, bombarding your home with toxic cancer-causing rays, just one among the many, terrible health effects of it.
I'd rather face the gun than that. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, exactly.
Because again, another thing and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Michael, but another thing to bring into the concept here is that it's not just human beings; it's the entire biosphere. Yeah, already the 4G is decimated the insect world. 75% of the insects are gone, and it's all because of telecommunications. Okay, so in that area where everything is I understand that there's some kind of a resort there that's really pushing, getting this in. Well, okay, so you're going to have the same thing happen to you that happened to the alternative lady who had just a bigger 4G system put on her land. Nobody's going to want to come to Taos, New Mexico, because it's polluted with 5G.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, we're going for historical preservation also because we have one of the longest living pueblos. I think the Pueblo people, they can date back probably 700 years on the land where they live in the middle, right next to the city.
Right.
Ooh, you might have, because of the Native Americans, check into the legality of it. You may have some kind of a weird thing that says you can't do this specifically to the Native Americans.
Okay.
Right. Of course. Well, we've seen how the rights of the tribes have been trampled over, as in Standing Rock. But the more legal precedents and laws we can bring to the table, the better.
Yeah. You know what? I also read that, and this was a town, it's Whitefish, Montana. I read that, in the article, they're fighting against 5G, but in the article they mentioned that, okay, so if AT&T comes into your city and puts up, 5G infrastructure, they also have to allow within that same space, let's say Verizon to do the same thing. So you're going to have like just tons of this stuff around, and that was really
look ugly.
It's going to be very ugly, and they're afraid. They're using tourism as their defense. They're saying, "Hey, this is going to ruin our downtown area." So I was hoping, as Reese said, that we could use that as an argument. And I wanted to ask you also about how much should we get into the financial, stuff. Like how the cities will lose revenue, real estate taxes go down, all of that.
Well, there's an interesting thing, and I'm not sure how prolific it is, but apparently what happens is that when they come into an area and they say, okay, we're going to put these 5G antennas on your existing telephone poles. Mm-hmm. At that point, the community has to pay for the vast majority of the amount to install them. In other words, each of the telecommunications companies has to pay 25% of the installation cost. Let's say it's 75%, okay, of the installation cost. Well, that 25% falls on the community. on top of that, they only have to spend a ludicrously low amount on maintenance, and these things are high maintenance devices. So, because like a smart meter, okay, you're using the same kind of technology in a smart meter, and they burn out in, like, I don't know what they're saying, but I mean, the meters on our houses were 20, 25, 30 years old, right? No, these burn out in a few years, so you have them replaced with something bigger and better. But the thing of it is that the same type of concept is involved in it. You know, where you just have to look at it and say, look, if you bring these people in, they're going to charge the community to put them on the pole, to maintain them, and we're paying for all this bad energy.
Right.
Well, and then the other, oh, geez, I'm going to let someone else go. Sorry.
Well, another aspect of this that I think particularly rural communities need to be aware of is, you know how it is difficult to find good medical care. Increasingly, we're losing our hospitals. Mm-hmm. And if the health effects of this are anything like it looks like they're going to be, for instance, take addiction and suicide. We know addiction and suicide are already up, around the country. And if you increase depression, you're going to have more addiction to deal with and more suicide. And, of course, the Alzheimer's, it increases Alzheimer's and diabetes. And so as you do these things, and the economic impact of the hit of those economics on rural areas is something we can't sustain. And so it would be penny wise and pound foolish at best.
Well, and then the other thing is, I heard that the first 5G phones went on sale last Friday, and to buy a 5G phone is $1,300.
Oh, good.
Price it out of range.
Yeah. That's true.
Please do.
Why don't you pay $1,300 to kill yourself? And I'll tell you, the thing of it is why am I so, insane about this, okay, is that my brother died from a brain tumor that is directly linked to Wi-Fi signals. And the tragedy is that I told him 20 years before this that was going to be the result because he was working around radars, not even a cell phone. I told him that, and he blew me off. It took 20 years, but exactly what I told him was going to happen happened. So I have blood in this battle.
Right.
And you do not want to see somebody dying from a brain tumor, where the brain is being shut down a little bit at a time, that they are doing things that are weird, that they're saying things, they've got headaches. When you see somebody who starts to have personality changes, please consider the electromagnetic. You may have had a cell phone tower put in that you don't even know is there. Please look at this.
And Nancy, the other thing is because I've been a massage therapist for 23 years, and many people on our team here in Taos are healthcare professionals. I mean, they've either been nurses or they're massage therapists, or they do any kind of different modalities like cranial sacral and Feldenkrais. And they're all now starting to put the dots together as we've started to bring this out about their own clients' health diminishing over the last period of time, not actually connecting it with the fact that we've been EMF radiated with the 4G for years and years now, and now we're all starting to put that together as healthcare practitioners and go, oh my God, this is what's happening, is that all of us are getting sick, and more than likely it's all from EMFs.
There was not anything called autism before they started putting telecommunications systems in.
Yeah.
Nancy, you know about this technology, about about how tough it is?
No, just how tough it is.
Yeah. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. You know about this technology, having worked with it in the military. Like, what kind of time frame are we talking? Like, if this goes live, in terms of the health deterioration of our health, that kind of thing.
I'll tell you what happened in Gateshead, Great Britain. They put what they did was they agreed to have paid for LED street lights put through Gateshead.
Right.
On the LED, which LED street lights are a problem to begin with, but on that was the 5G. Within virtually months of this being put on, the animals were all sick and dying. There was no births being had because nobody was able to have any babies. The kids would all of a sudden, especially the boys, break out in these nosebleeds. The death rate for strokes and heart attacks went way up. Okay, this is in months after they installed them. This is an instantaneous situation. Now, because you probably don't know the science, I'm going to give you just a brief explanation that maybe you can, be able to explain to somebody else.
Okay.
When we look at the 4G network, you're talking about a cell tower that needs another cell tower 20 miles away in order to keep the signal, because that's the cycle. That's how big the wave is.
Right,
okay?
right.
All right, in distance, 20 miles. Now, you'll see areas where they're much closer together. That's because there's so many people trying to use that system. But the reality is it's a 20-mile cycle. When you're talking 5G, you're talking millimeters.
Right.
Tiny little millimeters. So how is that going to work? Well, because it's a millimeter, you have to have these antenna systems much closer, like some say 800 feet, some say 500 feet. But what that means to you is in your house is that out of the 3 neighbors you have, one of you is going to have that antenna outside your door.
Right.
Now, the antenna system itself, the 5G system, is actually made of many, many micro kind of little antennas, and it's called an array. And what happens is that they focus the beam. In other words, you get a little piece and a little piece, and then you focus that beam. Well, that beam is 100 times more powerful than anything you've encountered.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Now, on top of that, that beam is going to directly get to your cell phone. All right. So you've got all of this beam directed to your cell phone.
Okay.
The cell phone is making you a target for this stuff. Now, these little millimeter things are. And there is, like I say, medical research that you can detail what happens to it. But the millimeter signal, and they'll tell you, well, it hits the skin, but it's low ionizing and it's not going to affect. No, that's BS. Okay, because it goes deep into your system and it actually gets into the mitochondria of the DNA and begins to make changes at that level. But more importantly, it just makes certain changes in your system that then all of a sudden your system is terribly out of whack and no doctor knows how to measure that breakdown. That's why the medical profession can't diagnose anything, because they're not looking for what they should be looking for. But that is all becoming, now that is available information, all right? Yeah. But when you have these little teeny beams that are coming at you, it's not just coming at your telephone and a human being that might be holding it. What it's doing is that it's hitting the microorganisms in the soil. It's hitting the insects. And remember, an insect has got less than a millimeter of skeletal system that's on the outside of the body. These things die so fast you can't even believe it. The small animals, they turned it on in Hague. They were going to try to test 5G in Hague. They turned the damn thing on, and hundreds of black sparrows fell out of the trees, dead.
Right,
the dogs in the park ran away. The ducks were trying to get underwater. Oh, we didn't turn on that. No, we didn't do it. Come on. The evidence is there. You know? And so what you've got is a system that is in no way, shape, or form a 4G upgrade. See, they're using 5G. Okay, it was first generation. They upgraded the technological concepts were the same, but they upgraded it. They put more. All right. Mm-hmm. So then they keep doing this, and they get to 4G, and they've got so much out there that was killing the whole biosphere. But we're going to go to 5G. So are they going to upgrade 5G? No, it's a brand new system. Why are you going to put $2 billion into building a new system?
Right.
It's a totally different system based on a totally different technology, and that technology was developed by weapons manufacturers.
Well,
This is not a
And
good
it's more
thing.
than 2 billion. The figure I've heard worldwide is 20 trillion.
Billion.
Did I say billion? See, I can't even get to that amount. It's 20
Yeah,
billion.
no, 20
20
trillion,
trillion.
which is, global GDP, gross domestic product globally is supposed to be 80 trillion. So when you want to look at the bigger picture of exactly what interests or factions are putting in 20 trillion with what objectives in terms of the pervasive control that this would allow, that gets into other territory, and we're staying mainstream here, but that is what we're dealing with. But as Nancy says, it's a system, and if enough local movements and groups and cities and towns around the country and the world are saying no, it doesn't work. You can't turn the system on. If enough of them, and at $1,300 a cell phone, you can keep it. I'm not going to pay $1,300 plus my taxes paying to keep these cancer-causing things in my home. That's not going to fly.
yeah. Well, I'm sorry. There's a interesting video, and I'd have to get the name of the two guys that presented it, but they were talking about the changes actually to how you would receive data, and it's so minuscule that they couldn't even measure it. It's sort of like going like this and like that. There's no difference really in what you receive and the time that you receive it. So it's a very interesting problem. And
and that I think points out the propaganda aspect of this. That faster downloads. We all get frustrated by slow downloads, but the difference, as you say, is negligible. Only really nerdy techies are going to get all excited about this. The real aspect of it, that just from many credible sources, is the true objective and agenda behind it is a massive increase in the power of AI.
Yes.
And there's 20,000 low orbit satellites having been approved to be launched in the next 2 years. And it's not monolithic. I mean, there's competing geopolitical factions. The Chinese have one agenda, the huge controversy about Huawei, their company that, intelligence sources in the U.S. are saying, well, that's just basically a front for Chinese intelligence, and they're manufacturing 5G devices that are being sold globally, and they've got backdoors in that technology to be able to spy on. The UK has got all kinds of Huawei technology. They're trying to block it in the U.S. So, the Russians are very aware of the dangers of 5G and not letting it in. The Chinese are trying to use it as a spy system to export to other countries. So, there's these different geopolitical factions that are fighting for the high ground, but essentially it's about AI. And, this business about, your faster downloads, you can download 12 movies while waiting at the airport gate while you're, being totally irradiated with cancer-causing millimeter wave. So the propaganda on this is just becoming so blatant, and yet people are buying it. The wonderful Internet of Things and super fast downloads. Well, we are cutting through that one city at a time. I just want to say, I think this conversation and the YouTube that we're going to have out on it very shortly, in my mind, this is one of the most information-packed and powerful conversations that I've experienced around the 5G issue. That includes our conversations on Project Camelot and with Sasha Stone. There is so much useful, on-the-ground, practical information and tools that have been shared here today that I am going to be very energetic about sharing the YouTube of this conversation as widely as possible and excerpting from it. So I'm just in so much appreciation for the work you've done in Taos, and of course all the information that Nancy's bringing to the table. This is a great conversation. So with 10 minutes remaining, I'd love to just ask Nancy to sort of guide us to kind of a summary from each of our guests about what we see as, just to reemphasize our best strategic points moving forward.
Well, the first thing I think that you have to do is you have to identify the people that understand there's a problem. one of the ways that we're doing it is we're trying to get these baseball caps out that just have a logo and it says, beware of 5G. Where the bees go, so go we all. And it's simply a way of, we're going to try to put them out as patches as well as the baseball caps. Because if you're wearing those in public, somebody who's wants to be with you but doesn't know who is there, we have to identify ourselves. Okay.
Nancy, can I also say one thing we did as a community is that we got yard signs printed up, 100 of them, and they're all over the county.
Saying,
Okay.
is 5G
Excellent.
safe, and with the website address.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. That's the first thing any group or any one individual has to do. And again, if you're one individual, go out and just start posting. We had this one woman. She made up some business-sized cards about 5G, and she'd go to the Publix or the grocery store, and she'd start leaving these things in the fruit. And around the store, right? So some customers come, what's that, But I thought this is brilliant. Any way to spread the information so that now the people can identify themselves and come together. Then once you come together, the first thing to do is to identify. And, we identify somebody in a government, all right, as being this person in this position. But identify the person as a person. Get to know who it is you're dealing with. And if you can, in any way, shape, or form, try to get them as a one-to-one person versus you're the activist and they're the government official. There's a lot of subtle ways to reach out to these people as one human being to another. But let's assume you can't do that. Then the next thing to do is to absolutely walk in there with bullet points. Boom, 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 boom. Okay? And even if you don't understand the full explanation of even the bullet points, you have got to go in there not as people concerned, but people who by their own education have educated themselves and are trying to tell me something important. You have to educate yourself. You have to walk in there with absolute knowledge that you are right. You have to do this. If you're involved in this, you guys can testify to this. You have no decision. You have to fight this once you understand it. So identify yourselves, prepare yourselves, get to know the people that you're trying to convince, and go in there as a group organized to the hilt. If they see an organization, which they think is organized, but just people coming together organized with their message, it's very difficult to shut you down.
And Nancy, you're right not to go into excessively long things with histories. I think one of the things we need to realize, I'm a former teacher, is that people have very short attention spans now. So they're going to drift off as from their brain fog, if nothing else. If you don't keep it tight, stick to the bullet points,
and also using different people, because if you just each person does a short thing, then somebody else comes in, it gets their attention again. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Right, and to stick to the rule of 3, 3 bullet points. It's like we can remember for some reason, 3. Okay, point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, and that's a lot more likely to stick. It's just the way our brains work.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm writing all this down. Okay. I am. This is great information. Really is. Okay.
Yeah, and so it's a very power-packed meeting that's coming up on June 11th with the Taos County Planning Department, with the Taos County Commissioners, and the experts that have been lined up, Tim Schokel, Dr. Sharon Goldberg, and some other folks.
Dr. Stephen Schneider.
Yeah, a lawyer, and Stephen Schneider, and the village attorney that you mentioned, who's presenting that really valuable document that Falcon read us the bullet points from. That's going to be, we're going to absolutely with your permission, share that as widely as possible, because that's easily adaptable. It's our constitutional rights. It's carefully prepared by a lawyer who knows her stuff. And the other public relations strategies, we'd like to share that the Taos movement, of course, they have public service announcements will be aired starting soon throughout the Taos radio stations regarding the county commissioners meeting and the 5G information. And of course, go ahead.
And then also just being out in the public and doing we had 5 different tables in 5 different parts of Taos last Wednesday for the National Day of 5G Awareness. And people were so grateful. And we have over 500 signatures so far, and we're a small community. I mean, Taos proper is only 5,000 people. So, people are starting to wake up. And, 2 months ago, nobody knew, or very few people knew. And now 2 months later, there's so much more information out there. We have handouts. We give people information, and even if they don't want to sign the signature, we also have stores and local people that have the petitions in their stores so that people can go by once they've got the information and sign the petition. So there's lots of different ways to engage the community, and everyone is so appreciative of our efforts.
Yeah.
That is really so encouraging. That is great news, and we're just so glad to be able to share with everybody on Radio 5G that this battle can be won, is being won, and that it's up to us on the local levels. Our website at 5g-know.com, 5g-know.com. We share a lot of resources state by state, across the country and internationally, of all the different groups in all the different areas. ehtrust.org also has an excellent database of those kind of resources. And it's rolling out. This is just so encouraging. I have a very strong, deep conviction that we are winning and we will win. And it's keeping our strategy simple, with these mainstream issues that we're hitting of the health of yourself, of your children, of the environment, of your property values. This is something that when it's in people's faces, as Nancy says, you can't say no. You have to become aware, and presenting the county commissioners with, here's the legal options. Here's what you're obligated to do. Here's how you can respond to this. Giving them, as Nancy says, a good excuse to do the right thing. That's, to share this across the country, this can be so powerful. The work that you have done in Taos will make an impact in Taos, and I believe as we share these tools, it's going to roll out across America and the world. So, we can all stop and just pat ourselves on the back a little bit, encourage each other, and know that our local work is having a national and international impact. So I'm just so grateful to the three of you, to our guests, Reese Jula and Jeannie Lotz and Falcon Britt, for coming on Radio 5G today with Nancy Hopkins and myself.
Power to the people.
Yay!
Yes, indeed. Take back your power, folks.
Well, we can go over a little bit here, because I want you ladies to each have the ability to at least say one more thing to the people.
Amen to that. Want to go ahead, Reese and Jeannie and Falcon.
All right, Reese here. No matter how large or small your community is, even if they haven't woken up to it yet, they can. And getting the information out there does make a difference, and we are making a difference, and it's really exciting to see that we can. And it's just a small group of people, just like Miss Mead said so many years ago.
Right.
Indeed, it's just a small group of people that makes the change.
And as Falcon, I'd like to say, please be sure to reach out to all the elements of your community, because for instance, Taos we have a large Indian population, we have indigenous population. We have a large Hispanic community, we have a large white community. And if you don't reach out to all the elements, and get everybody involved, you're diluting your true power, because everybody cares about their health when they understand that their children and their animals are in danger, and their grandchildren. Because when you damage, for instance, if you damage the DNA, that's it. It gets passed down damaged. And so we know that non-ionizing radiation does cause breakage in your mitochondria and your DNA. There's 11 studies that show that now. So
this is Jeannie. What I would say is there's sort of, and I know this is going to sound pie in the sky, but there's sort of a magic to this whole process that as we organized, things and people came to us. It was really so encouraging, and I'm not sure if everyone would have that experience, but we have had it here. And I think, if there's a fight between good and evil, I sometimes think that the good is very palatable within what we're doing, because it's just attracting other good things. So that's my little spiritual message to the world.
Light is rising on the planet. I really believe it is.
Yes. Light is coming lighter.
Yes. So
well, I agree.
Amen.
I agree with you guys that it is a battle between good and evil. You know, I mean, I've watched it. Mark Steele said the same thing. He said, a year ago, if you'd have told me I was going to be in a battle for good and evil, I would have laughed in your face. He said, but that's exactly what it is. Somebody out there wants to do evil. The only way we're going to stop it is to stop it. And the only way we do that is to come together. So thank you very much for being who you are and doing what you're doing and being such an example for just the one person out there that understands it. How can you, that one person, make a difference? It was these three women just on their own all of a sudden deciding and then coming together. Because the other thing that Mark made real clear to me was God's got my back, and God never loses.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Except for I'll say the goddess has our backs.
Well, I would too.
Right.
Who cares?
The unity, the blend of divine feminine, sacred masculine. We all have our path and our approach.
Right. We all have that capacity for mama bear energy.
Yes,
it's time for
exactly.
the mama bear to stand up in this culture and say no more.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And as a very well-known Indian woman activist whose name I don't recall at this time said, the thing for all those people who are allowing themselves to be co-opted to participating in this destructive agenda, they need to remember that Gaia always bats last. Gaia has the last word.
Yeah, she does.
So the soul of the earth, of Mother Earth, always bats last. So bless you all. Bless everybody out there. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll be following up here on Radio 5G with the developments in Taos. This is a very exciting and encouraging development and event coming up on June 11th. And so from Radio 5G, from myself, Michael Henry Dunn, and Nancy Hopkins, and our wonderful guests, Reese Jula, Jeannie Lotz, and Falcon Britt, thanks again for being with us. And on we go. See you next time, folks.